When it's PCS time, you know the drill. Pack, research to new base, get the kids in school, because family supports family. At American Public University, we support military families with flexible, affordable online education that moves with you. As a military spouse, your tuition rate is the same as your partner's, just $250 per credit hour. American Public University, education that moves with you. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.
This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. We try with each guest to bring brilliant people to the table, to the podcast. We try and make sure that we're learning, you're learning. We think of it as teach and entertain. I'm hoping that I'm learning, and hopefully we're all enjoying ourselves. Relatively short podcast. We've got today a brilliant Canadian person, a true unicorn of people, David Pivnick, who just is a brilliant guest and person, one of my favorite people in the world. He's had a chance to prepare for this podcast. I'll tee him up on the subject today. The subject today is, David, what are your biggest three predictions for 2025? When you look at the world, and I know you've had time to ponder this, what are your big predictions for next year? What do you look at?
I love, first of all, glad to be on. Thanks for having me. And I love that you teed this up prior to the podcast with, this will be a short and easy one, and then sort of threw that out into the universe with, what am I predicting for the future? Because it's always super easy to do that, especially with no prep time. So thank you. It's an interesting question. I think, I'm very interested to see in how things go, next month with the transition of leadership and President Trump becoming President Trump again. I guess one prediction I'll make is that the accomplishments of the Department of Governmental Efficiency will be overstated, and that the department will not actually cause the government to run efficiently in and of itself. I don't know that that categorizes as a bold prediction. I'll add that I think President Trump will have a second term that I think will likely be more successful than the first, largely because it won't be marred with the pandemic, hanging over his head, or at least I recognize COVID still lingers, but without the mass problems that were caused at that level, as occurred in 2020 and early in 2021 when things were shut down. But I think there will be, on the flip side of that, a fair amount of turnover once again in his cabinet, and I think it'll make for interesting times as we monitor some of the comings and goings from DC and how it impacts various departments. And I'll take a softball for a third and build on our discussion of last week, and add that the Chicago sports teams that you care about, say for the Blackhawks, will continue to struggle mightily next year.
Thank you. So really, on a couple of these thoughts, the Department of Government Efficiency, it's fascinating because they're sort of restricted in what they can really do. Some money will come out of the federal spending because of some of the things that are peeling off from the Biden era. But if they really tried to cut $300 million a year, or $400 billion a year, $300 to $400 billion a year in spending, it would sound good from a balance sheet perspective. If we were a company, the value might go up, but that $300 to $400 billion, at least in a lot of places, depending how much is cut, is part of what fuels growth in this country, even though it's deficit spending, which I abhor. So, like Elon Musk at Twitter cuts in like 70-80% of the workforce, and as far as I could tell, and this is no offense, but Twitter is better than ever. It's more usable. It's a little crazy, but more usable than ever. And I see how they make money. I see what they're doing. It's fascinating to sort of study Twitter. It seems to operate better than it did, quite frankly. And the difference is, if the government cuts that much spending, even the government might operate better, it would have negative implications for the economy as a whole, I think. So this is one of the reasons why no president, while they're actually in office, wants to actually cut spending. They want to cut it for when they're done. But how are they going to run up against those challenges of, yes, the government could run it better, I'm sure, with less people. I don't think there's a question about that. There's certain things that can't be done with less people. There's certain things that can. The government probably can be done with less people and more technology and just better people. No offense, but can they really cut spending during an administration, or will it cause recession, which nobody wants under their watch?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to my thesis on it, which is it's going to be a department that is almost destined to failure with that in mind. I think there is almost certainly, without any intended slight at any government employee or government program, there is almost certainly significant amounts of waste in the federal government, as well as, frankly, at the state government level, where I think there's a challenge, and I think it's a significant challenge, is identifying and being thoughtful about identifying the nature of that waste, where money is being spent unnecessarily, where things can be trimmed without impacting large numbers of people and their quality of life. But that's only half of the equation. And I think a lot of people's general concern is that Elon and Vivek and others will come in there and be, I'll say, hasty and just sort of make cuts where they think it might make sense, and that will cause harm. I don't think that will be the case. I think they're thoughtful enough people that there will be some level of a process, but I think figuring out what a process looks like and how to structure cuts and changes is going to be a process, and by the way, cost real money just to think about that, work through the process and implement it. But that only brings us to the point you raised, which is if you take a bunch of people and put them on the unemployment line and you cut spending in a bunch of industries, that's then going to affect other people's business and vendors who are selling products and services to the government, that has an ultimate effect on the economy and to day-to-day Americans who may be out of work or have significant impacts on their livelihood as a result, which then impacts other industries. And so it's sort of a reverse trickle-down economics theory, but I think it's a very real concern that you raise, and it makes the the thesis of we have inefficiency in the government and we're going to solve for it, which sounds very, very simple and sort of unobjectionable on its face. That seems like something everyone can rally behind and should not be opposed to. Frankly, even those in government should generally be on board with increasing efficiency, but it's not as easy to accomplish when you have to solve for doing it in an intelligent manner, A, and then B, implementing it in a way that doesn't have unforeseen, unintended consequences, both of which I think are far easier said than done.
Well, and that to me is really the challenge, that there are second level consequences to all of it that are, some of it easy to anticipate, some hard to anticipate, but mostly a lot of them quite real. It's finding spending cuts without having bad consequences is, I think, the great challenge in reality. In terms of one of the things that's frightening or interesting or however you want to watch it is President Trump has been very active in starting to bring lawsuits back. And in some ways, I can't blame him because he's been on the attack end of so many lawsuits. But most recently it was a lawsuit against George Stephanopoulos and I think ABC or NBC News about them saying he raped somebody when he was convicted of sexual assault, not rape. And you're fascinating situation where I think reportedly they settled for like $15 million. And you talked about the second presidency not being as maybe controversial as the first presidency. The first presidency, you had a press that was rabidly against President Trump, including places like MSNBC, and two or three different things. One, MSNBC's following has gone down so low, they've got to revitalize that. Even if they stay far left, their listenership's gone down, or their viewership's gone down so far, it's actually frightening or daunting if you're an MSNBC watcher and one of the networks that's intended to keep the president in line. So we assume Fox will line up regularly with the president. CNN is, trying to head themselves more and more down the middle, and MSNBC found themselves trying to make friends with the president now, which is just as the world turns, insanity, crazy. But what do you see about I'm not one of these people that's a never Trumper by any means. But what do you see about freedom of press in this? Because one of the things that made the last presidency so rocky was the constant fights between him and the mainstream press, or what they would, he would call the mainstream media, whatever you want to call it. It was just like every day it was on. The fight between the two of them was just exhausting and stressful. What about the press and where they're at today in this next presidency? What do you see going on?
Yeah, I believe it was the lamestream media was the verbiage of choice that he had coined, and not frankly one of his best witty retorts that was directed out into the universe. I think you hit the nail on the head. At the end of the day, one of the reasons I think it will be the second Trump presidency will be less controversial is I think more people this time, and maybe this is optimism on my part, but I don't think it is. I think more people are going to be focused on his actual policies and what he's doing, which is not to defend him or suggest that I think those policies are necessarily all going to be perfect. But I think there was a great deal of consternation and hand wringing the first time about what he was going to tweet and when, and frankly, a lot of hysteria about it. And some of the things when they're about, foreign leaders or world events, I don't think generally speaking it's great if the president is broadcasting his thoughts on Twitter, although I recognize Elon Musk views that as a great thing, but I think our mileage may vary. But I think it was the day-to-day little comments. Recently he's been taking shots at Canada, which is obviously an ally of the United States and an important trade partner and ally, obviously one near and dear to my heart. But I don't think Donald Trump tweeting about the great state of Canada is making a meaningful impact in the world, or at least it shouldn't be, frankly. And I think the focus is going to be more on, or at least my hope and my expectation truly is the focus will be more on, are there tariffs? Is there an impact on trade with other countries such as Canada versus did he say something not so nice about Justin Trudeau on Twitter, particularly where I think most Canadians have lots of not so nice things to say about Justin Trudeau themselves. So I think that is a big change that I'm anticipating, and some of it does go to your broader point about the mainstream media. I mean, there are lots of things again where I don't see the world necessarily eye to eye with Elon Musk, but when he talks about how Twitter is the leading source of news in the world right now, obviously a very self-serving statement for him when he's talking about a business that he owns, but I'm not sure he's wrong, frankly. I think there are a lot of people who get their news exclusively from Twitter, or if not exclusively, significantly from Twitter, and they may use that to go to other sites and to go to other sources from there. But I think there are a lot of people who are absorbing a lot of information and content in that manner, certainly far more than are currently watching MSNBC or CNN, and probably well more than Fox News, et cetera. So I think there's a shifting paradigm, and a lot of the news networks have realized the purely partisan approach to the news is no longer working for them. And it's an interesting shift because I think part of it is MSNBC isn't far enough left for the folks who really like or used to like MSNBC, but pivoting towards the middle or to the right is really hard for MSNBC as well because of where they're currently branded. And I think Fox News, ironically, has the opposite problem, where they're not sufficiently far enough to the right and pro-Trump at this point to appease a lot of their core demographic from just 5 to 10 years ago, and pivoting towards the middle isn't going to work for them very well either. So I think there's a lot of folks who have realized they can sort of pick their own viewpoints, and if you go on Twitter or X, as it were, you're able to follow and pick up on people you want to, and then the algorithm will do the rest and continue to funnel things that are interesting to you.
No, it's literally fascinating that you have the situation, right? Twitter, the Joe Rogan podcast, some of these other podcasts, they've done a bit of an end to run around ABC, CBS, NBC, and some of the cable networks too, in terms of their importance anymore for a lot of these stories. It really is a fascinating situation. On so many levels, David. I couldn't agree with you anymore. So a couple predictions so far. The Department of Government Efficiency won't be that efficient, won't be that governmental. Second, the Trump presidency will be somewhat less controversial. And the third big prediction is really that the Chicago sports teams, again, we are Chicago sports fans. I watch closely the Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, White Sox, Cubs. The Cubs are the only one that had a winning record last year of all those. They were 83 and 79. Everybody else is just awful right now. And you have made the prediction that the Chicago sports teams will continue to struggle with maybe some improvement with the Blackhawks, which are at 11 and 19 right now. They've had a couple horrible seasons in a row, so hard to see them getting worse, but it could happen. But your prediction is largely the sports teams continue to struggle in Chicago.
I think it's a safe prediction. I will say, attended a fun Blackhawks game last night. Great third period comeback against one of the best teams in the league. And it's good. I think it was only a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, I said to you that Frank Nazar and Kevin Korchinski are going to be on their way soon and are going to make a difference. And those guys came up in the last week. Kevin Korchinski looks like he's one of my favorites, admittedly, but looks like a whole new and improved player versus his rookie season last year. I think Frank Nazar is going to be really good. And so they have a lot of young talent. I don't think they're going to be a winning team the rest of this season, but I think they're going to be far more competitive and exciting to watch day to day. The rest of the Chicago sports teams just can't get out of their own way. I think the one possible place where that could go wrong or right for you, I suppose, is if the Bears hire and are able to convince a sort of, intelligent, creative young mind to come in and be the offensive coordinator or head coach. Probably would need to be head coach, but someone like Ben Johnson out of Detroit would be a jackpot hire. I'm just not sure someone like that's going to want to come to Chicago. But if the Bears could land someone of that nature, I think they could prove me wrong. The rest of the franchises the Bulls are pretty hopeless. The White Sox, are effectively at this point a AAA team that hasn't done anything to get better. And the Cubs, managed to have a great move like adding Kyle Tucker and 2 days later trade Cody Bellinger, who was, one of, if not their best hitter last year. So that kind of lateral change or set of changes is not going to get them anywhere.
Well, your point is well taken. If you're like we always say, you can have a great person in your organization or a great customer, and some people get so worried about customer concentration or talent concentration, and you could have ride or die people, but it's always Cody plus Kyle, not Cody or Kyle, because they're exactly as you said. You're not taking a step forward if you're just replacing your best player with another best player. That doesn't really do anything, really. It just is a trading of salaries and trading of situations, but it's the same ultimate outcome. Where to really be a great organization, you need lots of A players, whether it's in business or sports. You need lots. I remember sitting on two different boards at one time in my career. One board had one A+ incredible leader, one organization had 5 or 7 A+ incredible leaders. 20 years later, the organization with 5 to 7 20 A+ leaders is still thriving incredibly. The other one, not so much. So it ended up really selling out a long time ago at its peak at whatever it could get to, but it couldn't get very far with one great leader. And it's a similar thing with these sports teams. You need a great coach and you need multiple great players, not just one. And you can't get rid of the one and replace them with one. You need multiple. It really is. It really is. It is challenging to watch as a Chicago sports fan, but your predictions, we'll see at the end of next year how they play out. Less divisive Trump presidency, Department of Government efficiency. That's maybe not all that can't do that much. And then finally, Chicago sports teams will still not be good. David Pivnick, as always, you come to play, one of the best in the business, a true unicorn, one of the very best we get to work with. Thank you for joining us on the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Scott. And I will add, just as a parting bonus prediction for you, I'll add that I predict next October you'll once again be too optimistic on the Bears and will be let down in the remaining months of 2025.
When they were 4-2 this year, I did think that our problems were over. It seems as though, like the Wicked Witch of the West, you spoiled our dreams in a hurry. But thank you anyways.
When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. So at American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University, value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.